Hi, grade sixes. Today we're going to be starting a new section in our textbook, which is quite exciting and one of my favorite, and that is about fables. You may have learnt fables when you were younger. Fables are stories that personify animals. So they give animals, although animals do have a lot of human characteristics, we don't really expect animals to dress in human clothes or to have human occupations, to do the jobs of humans. So in a fable, animals are given not just human personalities, but human problems. Although the stories have animal characters, we use fables to teach us a moral or a lesson about ourselves, about our human behavior. So, for example, there might be a story about a lazy grasshopper, but it's meant to teach us humans about being lazy. If you look at page 91 of your textbook, it looks like that, and you'll see that there are 3 pictures with a little bit of writing on the bottom. They ask you, do you know any of the stories illustrated on page 91? Right, some of them you may know, some of them you may not. Picture A shows a character which we are going to meet, and that is Anansi the spider. And it shows the story of Anansi the spider and the turtle. Now, in the story of Anansi and the turtle, Anansi plays a rather mean trick on the turtle, which comes to eat with him, and the turtle retaliates by playing a trick on Anansi. We'll learn that fable another day. Picture B shows one of Aesop's fables. Now, Aesop was a very famous man who's written many, many stories using animals as the main characters to teach us a lesson. That's the story of the fox and the grapes. In the story of the fox and the grapes, the fox is unable to grab some grapes that are just out of reach, and he walks off saying that he didn't like the look of the grapes anyway. And there's variations of the story. Sometimes in the story there's a fox and a crow, and the fox is able to trick the crow into dropping the grapes. Right, and picture C shows another of Aesop's fables. That's of the hare and the tortoise, and I think that's one that you've all learned before, so you know the hare and the tortoise compete with each other to see who's going to win. And obviously the hare is overly confident. He sleeps en route and is beaten by the slow and steady tortoise. Now we know animal characters in fables are often exaggerated. They behave in stereotypical ways. Now we've spoken about stereotypes and stereotypical behavior before. Let's look at the animals on page 92 of your textbook. The pictures show a tiger on the left, a snake there at the bottom, and a spider. Now, these are 3 characters which often appear in fables. And I want you to answer question 1 on page 92 of your textbook in your English workbook. So this is the question in case you can't see, or in case you want to. On the slide it says, look at the pictures of the 3 main characters in the story. Now, these characters, the tiger, the snake, and the spider, are going to appear in the fable. What qualities do you think these characters will have in the story? So I'm going to just show you how you could phrase your questions in case you're not sure how to answer the question. So you might say, for example, something like, I think the tiger is going to be, then you would describe what you think the tiger is going to be. You'll say, I think that the snake is going to be or is likely to be. What do you think their personality, what qualities do you think they might have in the story? And I think the spider is going to be, what personality do you think the spider is going to have? I don't want you to try and sneak forward or try and read the story to get these things. I want to know, stereotypically, what idea do you have of tigers in stories, snakes in stories, and spiders? What do you think they will be like before reading any stories about them? Number 2, it says match the following animals with the stereotypical characteristics they are usually given in stories. There's a little table in your book, and if you want to draw the table as it is and draw arrows to match one to the other, you can. If you want to just write the names of the animals on the left and then write the correct qualities or characteristics next to them, that's fine. Let's quickly have a look. We've got a lion, a hare. A hare is like a rabbit. We have a fox and a mouse. And then on the right of the table, you have characteristics, that means qualities, parts of their personality. We've got cruel and cunning, quiet and brave, noble and powerful, sly and tricky. Now, we know that animals in nature may have personalities. But in stories, we use certain animals to show or to portray certain personality types. So we're talking about stereotypical characters in fables. So let's talk about the lion. Usually in fables, lions are noble and powerful. They could be kings or royalty, the king of the jungle, and very powerful politically or very strong. Right, then we have the hare. The hare in traditional fables could be sly, could be tricky, usually very, very clever, and able to, they're always trying to outwit and outplay the other characters, quite competitive. The fox, typically in fables, although we don't have many stories with foxes here in South Africa, the fox is usually either a cruel character who takes advantage of other characters, or he's cunning, a very sly, smart, but smart to his own advantage. And then we have the mouse. The mouse, usually in traditional fables, it might be a more quiet character, not perhaps not the main character, but always very brave. Like remember the story of the mouse who frees the lion from the net. Quiet, unassuming, but very brave, and steps up to the plate to save the day sometimes. Then number 3. This is the question on the bottom of page 92. Do you think the pictures in your textbook show the snake, tiger, and spider in stereotypical ways? In ways that you would expect. So do they look like, from looking at the picture, their facial expression, their position, the way that they look, do they look stereotypical the way that you would expect? So there's a few ways you could answer the question. You're going to fill in the detail, but I'll get you started. Yes, I think that the picture shows the tiger in a stereotypical way because I can see the tiger looks a certain way, or what about the tiger? You could say tigers in stories are usually like this and this and this, and in the picture, yes, the tiger does look this way. And then, so you'll express this as just an idea for you to formulate your answer around. You could think no. You could say, no, I don't think the picture in my textbook shows the tiger in a stereotypical way because I think tigers in stories are usually like this and like this and like this. And the tiger in this picture looks like this and like this and like this. But remember, they want you to speak about the snake, the tiger, and the spider. Each of those pictures, do they look the way that you would expect those characters to be? And you need to speak a little bit about each. So that's going to take quite a few lines to talk about. I want you to skip the questions 1 to 3 at the top of page 93 until you've heard the story in the next video. So if you want to read through them, you can, but I don't want you to write the answers down yet until you've heard more of the story. Now, I want you to go to the bottom of page 93 and look at those questions. I want you to think about these questions, and I would like you to discuss them with somebody if you can. If there's somebody at home, an older brother or sister, or a parent, or if you want to discuss with a friend by WhatsApp or some other social media, I would love you to talk through these questions with somebody, but I don't want you to write the answers down at this stage. Just as an introduction to the Anansi stories. The fables surrounding Anansi the spider originate in West Africa. So there you can see the continent of Africa, and the west coast is that coast on the top kind of left-hand side. Okay, that kind of bulge that bulges out into the sea. There you can see there's a number of countries which make up West Africa. So those are regions today, places like Guinea, Benin, Burkina Faso, the Ivory Coast, Liberia, Senegal. There's a whole lot of countries that form part of West Africa today. In the 1700s, many West African people, we know that they were captured, kidnapped, forced against their will to go and work as slaves, to be slaves in the Caribbean or the Caribbean. So you've already learned, I'm sure, if not, you will learn next year, that the tragedy of many, many people being stolen from their land, stolen from their families, forced to travel across the sea on a very dangerous journey, and there they were taken to the islands that you can see to the top of South America. If you can see, I don't know if you can see, on those green arrows it says British Caribbean and French Caribbean, Dutch Caribbean. So those were all a series of islands owned by the British, the French, the Dutch, and people were sent there and forced to work day in, day out without pay. Now, can you see they worked on very, very large plantations and they were expected to work very long and very hard. Now, most people could not take anything with them. Because they were captured, taken by surprise, they didn't have time to pack their bags or to say their farewell or to take anything with them. So most people brought nothing with them except for the songs, the poems, and the stories from their land. Sometimes they brought other things like their religion, like recipes, but they were things that were kept in their head and that could be passed on through stories. Now, the stories continue to be passed down through what we call oral tradition. So that means stories passed down from parents to children, grandparents to grandchildren, in poetry, and today written down in books. And we see stories from ancient West Africa in movies and plays. Now, the Anansi stories feature very, very prominently. So there are a number of stories which feature this character, Anansi. I want you to think about the questions on page 93. You don't have to write down your answers, but I would like you to think about them and discuss them with a friend or relative. If you don't have somebody to discuss with them, then you can jot down a few ideas in the back of your book. I'll read them to you, but I'm not going to show you on the slide, as I would have liked to discuss this with you in class, but I would like you to talk to somebody else about this. So number one says, would you say the slaves had a lot of control over their own lives or very little? Keep in mind that they were actually seen as property and that the slave owners felt that they in fact owned them. Okay. Number two, the Anansi stories. They describe a tiny, very tricky little spider who overcomes great difficulties by using his wits. Why do you think these slaves would enjoy telling these stories? So that's just a kind of, you're going to take a little bit of a guess as to why the Anansi stories became so popular. Number three, what qualities do you think Anansi has that would be important for slaves? Now, we don't know much about Anansi yet. You may or may not know stories about Anansi, but I'd just like you to take a guess and to start to think about what the stories may or may not be about and why they're so treasured and so repeated so often by the slaves themselves and by their progeny, so by their children and their grandchildren. All right, good. So I'm looking forward to looking at a few fables, and we're going to look at the story of Anansi and the